If you've ever been told that you need 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement, I want to pause for a second, because that number, while widely quoted, is one of the most oversimplified rules in retirement planning. And if it's wrong, it very well could mean that you end up working longer than you need to, saving far more than you need to, and vastly overestimating how much weight your portfolio truly needs to carry in retirement. So today, I want to walk through the data. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin, and welcome back to the channel. Now, of course, oversaving for retirement is not the most terrible situation to be in, but it does come with a cost, and that cost is hours of your life. And that's why it's important to understand the real data so you can more accurately plan for your future. And that's why I like to dive so heavily into the actual numbers. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why income replacement is not flat, and why for many households, especially middle and upper middle income earners, the 80% rule may significantly overstate what you actually need. For decades, financial planners have relied on a very simple rule of thumb. Replace 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income once you stop working. And that makes sense because on the surface, once you stop working, maybe you're no longer contributing to your investments. So your savings and investments can fall off. You're no longer paying payroll taxes. Maybe you don't have to have a work wardrobe or work-related expenses. Maybe you even pay off your mortgage. So naturally, your spending should fall, at least somewhat. That's the logic. But the 70 to 80% rule assumes that your income and your spending stay proportionate. That is to say that as your income increases, so too does your spending. But the problem with this thinking is that every bit of retirement data we have says it doesn't exactly work that way. Now let's talk about what the actual data says. When researchers look at real retiree spending patterns, using sources like the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, longitudinal retirement surveys, and large household spending data sets, they find something genuinely fascinating. Retirees typically spend between 54 and 87% of their pre-retirement income. But here's the real key. Most households cluster towards the lower end of that range. Multiple analyses show that median retirement spending often falls into the 50 to 70% range of pre-retirement income. And even more, spending doesn't just drop once and then stay flat. It tends to continue to fall over time. After age 65, real spending tends to fall by roughly 1 to 2% per year. Within the first 3 to 4 years of retirement alone, spending often drops 5 to 12% below pre-retirement levels. Another analysis found that households headed by someone approaching retirement were spending around $70,000 per year, but that fell to about $52,000 per year in early retirement and declined even further as older ages. That is a true downshift in consumption, and I do want to pause here and give a little context, because in every video where I talk about a decline in spending in retirement, I tend to get a lot of pushback from people saying, well, maybe people are spending less because they're running out of money. But that is not what the data shows. The data shows this spending decline even with households that have more than enough in assets to maintain a higher level spending. Across all households, we tend to see this same structural decline. And honestly, common sense supports this as well, because when we think about the lifestyle of an 80-year-old or a 90-year-old, we know they don't have the same spending patterns as, say, a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old. Travel slows down, big ticket purchases taper off, status-related spending disappears. This isn't deprivation, it's just different life stages. And here's the part that gets really interesting. The decline is even more pronounced for higher income earners. So the higher your income was pre-retirement, the more likely it is that you have a smaller replacement ratio going into retirement. And that's really good news for those of us who are chasing financial independence. Before we even talk about Social Security, I want to spend a moment on this table from Fidelity, because this alone tells an important story. Fidelity breaks down replacement ratios by income tier. If your household income is under $50,000, you may need to replace about 80% of your pre-retirement income. Between $50,000 and $80,000, the target drops to about 75%. Between $80,000 and $120,000, it's around 70%. And once income moves above $120,000, the suggested range falls to roughly 55 to 65%. Now let's talk about why. Lower income earning households tend to spend a greater portion of their income on the essentials. So housing, food, utilities, transportation, healthcare. So there's simply less discretionary spending to trim. So once they reach retirement, their spending compresses less because a greater share was already going towards the essentials. That's why their replacement ratio remains higher. Now let's contrast that with higher income households. As incomes increase, a greater portion of earnings often go towards retirement savings contributions, higher marginal tax rates, payroll taxes, commuting costs, work wardrobe, and lifestyle tied to career identity, or even temporary life expenses or simply upgrading items during peak earning years. So in percentage terms, they may not need to replace as much of their income to maintain their same lifestyle in retirement. But I do want to add some important nuance here. Even as incomes increase to $200,000 or $300,000 a year or higher, I would be cautious about dropping that replacement ratio below 50% because there does come a point where a lot of discretionary spending tends to become a little bit sticky. Maybe you hire a housekeeper to clean your home. Maybe you fly business class. Maybe you live in a higher value home and that comes with higher property taxes. Or maybe dining out or travel has become part of your identity. Sometimes these individual items have a way of becoming permanent fixtures in your life. And if you plan on continuing them in retirement, your spending may not compress in the way a simple ratio may suggest. So this table does give us guidance, but remember at the end of the day, your spending is going to be determined by your lifestyle, not some general guide. But we do see something that's directionally very important with this data. Replacement ratios are not flat. They tend to decline as incomes increase. Now, even these income-based replacement ratios are incomplete because they're missing something that affects nearly every retiree in America, and that is Social Security. And once we layer that in, the story becomes even more nuanced. Again, I'm going to refer to a wonderful table from Fidelity's research. Here's where things move from percentage of income that we need to replace to where the income actually comes from. Let's walk through this. At a $50,000 income, we see the total replacement target is 80%, but we can expect that Social Security would cover about 35% of this, and that savings then must generate about 45%. At a $100,000 pre-retirement income, our total replacement target is about 72%. We can expect that Social Security would cover about 27% of this, and our savings are expected to cover roughly 45%. At a $200,000 income, the total replacement target falls to about 61%. Social Security is expected to cover 16% of this gap, and our savings, again, is still expected to cover about 45%. Even at a $300,000 income, our total replacement target is about 55%. Social Security is only expected to cover roughly 11% of this, and our savings is still expected to carry about 45% of the burden. Let's pause here for a second, because what stayed consistent? Savings at about 45%. Savings is expected to carry about 45% of your income in retirement. And what changed? Well, as our income grew, we saw that the total share replaced by Social Security decreased, and our replacement ratio that we were targeting decreased. This is what I once referred to in a previous video as Fidelity's rule of 45%. This idea that in retirement, your portfolio should really only be carrying about 45% of your total retirement spending. Not 70%, not 80%, and certainly not 100%. And this is something that we really want to hone in on. So let's do an example. Suppose we have a household earning $70,000 per year before retirement. Fidelity's guidance would suggest targeting a roughly 75% replacement ratio at that income level. 75% of $70,000 is $52,500 per year in retirement spending. If savings are expected to cover about 45% of pre-retirement income, that means your portfolio needs to generate about $31,500 per year. The remaining 30%, or roughly $21,000, would be coming from Social Security. Now let's apply a withdrawal rate. If we assume a 4.7% withdrawal rate, generating $31,500 per year would require a portfolio of approximately $670,000. And that is very different than assuming you need to replace 75% of your income from your investments alone. Now let's take this one step further, because everything we just walked through and all of Fidelity's ratios assume a single income earner. But what if you're part of a dual income earning household or a two-person household? Let's say for our example this time, we still have a household that made $70,000 per year. One spouse worked and the other spouse was a stay-at-home spouse. So once the stay-at-home spouse reaches full retirement age, they'd be entitled to 50% of the primary worker's full benefit. So if one spouse receives $21,000 per year, the other would receive $10,500. That's $31,500 combined. Notice what just happened. We still need $52,500 in total retirement income, but now Social Security is covering over $31,000 of that, which means the portfolio only needs to generate about $21,000 per year. At a 4.7% withdrawal rate, that implies a portfolio of roughly $446,000. And that's the key insight, because replacement ratios don't necessarily mean replacement from a portfolio, because nearly every household has Social Security. Some have pensions or an annuity or part-time work or rental income, and all of these other income sources ease the burden that your portfolio has to carry. And when portfolio withdrawals are lower, required drawdowns fall. Sequence risk declines, longevity risk improves. This is why retirement planning is really income source based, not portfolio only thinking, because anytime you layer in additional income sources, you ease the pressure of your portfolio. And by looking at all of these income sources and our portfolio, this is how we turn retirement planning into a solvable math problem. Now I want to look at one more chart from Fidelity, because this one illustrates something incredibly important. It shows how the age at which you claim Social Security directly changes the burden or the lift that your portfolio has to carry in retirement. Let's assume a household with $100,000 of pre-retirement income. Based on Fidelity's modeling, the total lifestyle needed in retirement would be about 72%, or $72,000 per year. Now that total doesn't change. But watch what happens when Social Security is claimed at different ages. If you retire at 62, you can expect that Social Security might cover 17% of this gap. So your savings would then need to cover about 55% of the gap. If you retire at 65, Social Security would cover about 22%, so your savings would need to cover about 50%. At full retirement age of 67, Social Security would be expected to cover about 27%, and your savings would cover about 45%. And if you delayed all the way to the age of 70, Social Security would cover roughly 32%, and your savings would only need to cover about 40%. Notice something powerful here. At every single age, we're still targeting a replacement of 72%, but there is a meaningful swing in how much our portfolio has to cover. If we retire early and claim Social Security early, we can expect a larger burden on our portfolio, about 55% of our spending. But if we delay retirement and receive a larger Social Security benefit, our portfolio by 70 might only need to cover about 40%. This is a meaningful shift. We see a swing of a 15% gap. So let's make this tangible. Let's translate it to a portfolio itself using Fidelity's $100,000 example. At age 62, if your portfolio needs to generate 55% of $100,000 That's $55,000 per year. Assuming a 4.7% withdrawal rate, that implies a portfolio of nearly $1.2 million. But if you wait until age 70 and that portfolio only needs to generate about 40% or $40,000 per year, that implies a portfolio closer to $850,000. That's a $350,000 difference in portfolio required. That can be the difference between an aggressive drawdown or a more conservative drawdown. That can be higher sequence risk or more portfolio stability. Now, and this is important, there is no universally correct age to claim Social Security. When you claim is deeply personal to your life and your household. It depends on when you retire, your health and expected longevity, your spouse and coordination strategy, your comfort with market risk, and your overall asset base. There's no single answer, but this image does illustrate the magnitude of that decision. When you choose to claim Social Security, you're not just locking in your monthly benefit, you're also changing the structure of your portfolio and how much weight it would have to carry in your retirement. So what this all tells us is that the 80% rule on its own is incomplete. It may be a reasonable starting point, but as you move closer to retirement, you always want to tailor your strategy to your specific situation, not just some blanket general rule. And as always, I believe in incorporating real retirement data. And that shows us that spending typically declines after retirement. Replacement ratios tend to fall as income increases. Social Security absorbs a meaningful portion of baseline expenses. Claiming age materially shifts the portfolio pressure. And ultimately, your lifestyle determines the final number. Retirement planning rarely fits one single universal ratio, and keep in mind that none of the ratios we talked about here are tailored to any individual household, but it does highlight something important. They show that replacement looks different at different income levels. They show how income streams interact. They show that portfolio pressure is not fixed. It's influenced by structure and timing. And hopefully that gives you a more informed framework to start planning your own retirement. So rather than targeting 80% of your pre-retirement income blindly, maybe you start asking wiser questions. Like, what are my real expenses? What income streams will I have? How will those pieces interact? And what does my portfolio actually need to carry? And these questions and their answers can absolutely bring your retirement into a sharper focus. And if you run the numbers, you just might find that you're able to retire on a portfolio that is dramatically less than what these general rules might otherwise suggest. So what are your thoughts? Leave them in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. UPS, if you know, you know. It's Tuesday, and that means we have a tornado siren going off. I was like, what is that sound? That is me every single day. What is that sound? I hate sound. Oh, it's the worst.